In exploring leadership, commercial architecture is a field that offers many fascinating elements. It's a world where knowledge work is made real in an often epic scale, where each project is a one-off, custom-tailored endeavor that takes years and costs millions. Architects first have to mold their clients' dreams into creative designs. This involves the delicate merger of creativity and imagination with their clients' expectations and grounding it all in the real world. They then need to translate it into drawings and specifications clear enough for the tradesmen to implement it in concrete and steel. Architects aren't simply the designers, but also are the guides who help build teams that coordinate dozens of trades and thousands of components into a cohesive whole.
Synthesizing those elements together to create something is kind of the magic moment, right? It's not just a box. There's site responsiveness, there's design guidelines, there's clients' desires, there's some image that they perhaps want to project to the world. And so all those things need to be synthesized into something that is wonderfully accommodating and affordable and durable for the client.
Building these teams takes leadership skills at the highest level, and that makes it absolutely fascinating to me. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to Tim Williams, a bright star in the world of commercial architecture. In this conversation, Tim tells us about how he found his passion for building teams, the highly cross-disciplinary nature of the profession, the joys of teams when they work well, and of course, when they don't. And that's what this is all about. This is Leading Smart, the show about managing in the brainpower age. It's a field guide to the joys and challenges of leading and working in the modern workplace. I'm Chris Williams, your guide to the stories and ideas that I hope will inspire you to be a better leader in the world of knowledge work. In this episode, we explore leadership in the world of commercial architecture. This is episode 207, a conversation with Tim Williams. Tim Williams is a partner with ZGF, a leading commercial architecture firm with several hundred employees in a half a dozen offices across the U.S. and Canada. ZGF has a very intentionally broad spectrum of projects, from hospitals and labs, offices and colleges, to museums and train stations. They've achieved accolades and awards across the industry and are especially proud of their sustainability work. Tim leads the Washington, D.C. office, although how he talks about his role tells you a lot about him.
I describe myself as a partner in the D.C. office. When I'm pushed, I'll say that I'm the managing partner. We are, as a firm, we're trying to get away from partners that have managing or design in front of their title. It's just we're partners. I prefer sort of a more humble approach. I would rather, if when I'm in a room or whatever, people don't think of me as, the partner in the room, but just another colleague that's there in the space with them.
In the interest of full disclosure, I should tell you that Tim is my cousin. Our fathers were identical twins, although outside of facial appearance, two more different men are hard to imagine. Tim's father was the chair of the archaeology department at Harvard for decades, and Tim grew up in Boston. That's where he discovered the value of a team.
How the way I work with teams and the way I perceive teams, the way I value teams and how I value teams, and the people that I'm working with on the team, where did that come from? Is something I've been asking myself since listening to the early podcast of yours and others. And I do consume management books business fables, all kinds of stuff to help me think through challenges that I'm coming through. In fact, I reach out to people, yourself included, to ask questions. Most of my job these days is about hiring talent, retaining talent, and ensuring we have the right talent on each of the project teams. But back to the beginning of my query here was about why do I think about these and why do I value these things? Arguably, I grew up in a culture in high school, in all boys prep school in New England, where individualism was king. It was about you. It was about your own success. It was not about the collective. As much as the school had school spirit and we had teams, that is certainly the culture that I grew up in. The education, continuing on in architecture, ultimately after college and in my master's program, architectural education for the most part is individual. You have a project, and the people in your studio class all pursue it individually. Now, there seems to be a trend where there's more group projects emerging, but it is not the core of the way the curriculum is structured. At least in my experience, it's about the individual achieving some sort of excellence and delivering that design and defending their design as an individual. So being a product of that, how is it that I've come out to value teams and really almost at the expense of the individual? I really value what the team can do. And I think the team is the way that we are successful, not based on an individual. It's the team effort. And in reflecting, I was thinking back to maybe the earliest point in my life where I realized that I'm part of something else, and it's more than just me. It's part of something else that I can support. And I think it was ninth grade. The high school I went to was very athletically competitive. I was a reasonably good athlete. And when I was playing soccer and other sports like that, we would run they called it a moose lap, which was running around all the athletic fields at the school is one big lap. And I would often do quite well in that portion of the soccer training program. Now, out on the field and kicking the ball and passing the ball and things like that, I was not as skilled. I don't think I have very good eye-hand coordination or eye-foot coordination for that matter. But apparently running and endurance was something that I was able to do quite well. And so the coach at one point said, "Have you ever considered cross-country running?" And to be honest, I had not. And I thought, well, maybe that's something I could try. And so maybe then being a second run on the JV team or something for soccer, maybe I could do something different and achieve something different in cross country. And on the face of it, cross country running is an individualistic sport. You're out there, you're running. You're not passing something to someone else. This isn't a relay race. It's a race, and you score first, second, third, or whatever it is. And it's based on time, and you're out there running by yourself, essentially. Well, you're not really, though. And this is what I learned. As much as it's individual and there's individual performances, the way that cross-country running is scored is they take the top 5 from your team that finished the race, and they add up the position where you come in the race. So obviously, if you're first, that's really good. But you could be 10th or 15th or 57th, and you could actually be scoring for your team, and you could make the difference between the team winning or losing. Because you're displacing one of the other team's runners wherever you come in. And so the sprint at the end, the push in the middle, trying to get ahead of the person in front of you, it doesn't matter whether you're leading the pack or in the middle of the pack. Every time you're ahead of the next person, you're still contributing to your team's success. Learning that lesson, that my individual performance, regardless of whether it was the top or whether it was in the middle, I was still contributing to the success of the team, or I had the potential, very great potential, to make the difference, frankly, in winning or losing that race for the team as a whole. I don't know that if you had asked me in ninth grade whether I understood the import of that and how that would shape the way I see teams and people, and maybe that's not even the thing today, but it's in thinking about this question, that is one of these moments when I reflect back that it was the first time I realized that I could contribute to something and not necessarily have to come in first, to the success of something and not have to come in first. I will say that then during my graduate school work, I was also someone that, for whatever reason, I had spent some time building architectural models prior to going to graduate school. I had some knowledge of techniques and building them. And so I ended up helping a lot of my classmates build their architectural models, or at least help give them some skills and techniques. And arguably, I'm helping them do better, and perhaps at my own expense. But I never really saw it that way. I guess I felt that if I had something I could share, I would, and I did. And I would argue that understanding of helping others and not being very holding things too close has been a great strength in building teams and in building successes, and with clients. Sort of open and clear dialogue has always been something that's been fruitful for me on projects and in relationships with clients and whatnot. So I guess I value that.
Architecture, like many disciplines, requires a mix of skills, and building a team that effectively uses each person's expertise is a skill of its own.
Architecture as a practice is evolving and has evolved. It used to be that there were the architects, and an architect, I think, at one level means sort of master builder. And so someone who would know a little bit about it, hopefully a lot about all the different aspects of the building. And then there would be just rooms full of drafters. And there's images from, early part of the last century or mid part, where there's just vast rooms of people with graphite on their sleeves because they've been drawing, literally hand drawing, and then sheet after sheet after sheet after sheet, and erasing, and all this sort of culture around the craft of drawing. And so then there was a whole slew of people that were trained as draftspeople. And I think there's some engineering disciplines that continue to use them today, but architects largely don't use draftspeople anymore. We are the draftspeople, and I don't know whether that's because the technology has become easy enough where we don't need to have hours and hours and hours of work to get something drawn up. We can just do it ourselves. And when I say ourselves, it means that we hire all of them. They're all trained as architects, and they all ultimately, the vast majority of them will get licensed as an architect. But a lot of their job is sitting there drawing in the computer day in and day out. And they're not just drawing, they're coordinating typically with all these other disciplines. And so there's the sort of cliche of designing a building is sort of 10% design, and then there's 90% of just doing the work to get it done and make the directions essentially for the contractor. And that maybe is even true of how we divide up the team. So there's usually someone who is maybe that creative brain power that comes up with somehow it's synthesizing together this program. When I use the word program, when architects use the word program, we're talking about typically an accounting for the spaces that are requested or needed or required within the building. And that would include mechanical spaces, and it would include, data closets. It includes conference rooms and office space, open office, collaboration, kitchenette, you name it. If you add up, so many square feet per each of those items on a tabular form, that's what we call a program. And so synthesizing those elements together to create something is kind of the magic moment, right? It's not just a box. There's site responsiveness, there's design guidelines, there's clients' desires, there's some image that they perhaps want to project to the world. And so all those things need to be synthesized into something that is wonderfully accommodating and affordable and durable for the client. And so we have people, and there are people that are better at this than others, that are great. I'll call them conceptual thinkers. And they are great at understanding, synthesizing, coming up with strategies to accommodate all of this stuff. They are not the person that's going to make sure that the data runs are less than 300 feet from each of the data closets, and that means we need another one over there, because that's not the person that's going to do that. Maybe they could, but their highest and best use is helping us synthesize all those program elements into something, and marrying it together with something that's also with a consideration of the building techniques. Is it a steel structure for the building? Is it concrete? Is it clad with largely curtain wall? Is it going to have masonry on the exterior? There's all those kinds of decisions and discussions that go on with an owner that are wrapped up in a number of things that are not super clear. They're not formulaic. And it's a trial and error process typically early on to figure out where we are and how close we're getting to their ambitions. Now, hopefully they've hired us, and they have hired the architect they choose because they kind of like the work that architect has done. They know that they have the appropriate experience in that kind of building type, and you're starting from that sort of common ground. But it deviates from there in all different directions. And navigating that is something that, frankly, I've spent more of my life on that aspect of what we do and managing the client's expectations and how we're accommodating those topics than I have on the production of the documents themselves. I've done it all. But you realize that there's some people, and they're just the way they understand the world and what they want to do on a daily basis is much more attuned to some of those other tasks, equally as important. And this is there's the person who's skilled at synthesizing the program together is awesome. The person who can coordinate the mechanical systems into the building such that the floor to floor doesn't have to increase and all the finishes can stay where we wanted them to is equally as brilliant and talented. It's just a very different set of skills often. The team will have different people, and they will come onto the team at different times. They will drop off then at different times, but usually there's one or two people that will stay consistent throughout the whole process, and they perhaps have the 30,000-foot view, but they have the ability to kind of quickly dive in and help solve problems on projects at the same time.
This complex mix of people, especially as it relates to the actual construction, requires even better team building and management techniques.
The backgrounds of the people that are working on projects are very vast, right? You've got the tile layer, the electrician who's maybe come up through an apprenticeship program, and then you've got someone who perhaps was very highly educated at some of the finest institutions in America or the world. And so there's this sort of craftsperson and maybe really bright, smart person challenge. And it's really good. And from my experience, it's really good we have a bunch of people in between, because sometimes the brilliant communicating with the tile setter will end up in a train wreck. And so how do we bring expectations aligned for the end product? The folks in between are the ones that help us get there, but while maintaining the design vision. We still want the thing to be everything that we had hoped from a design perspective, and the craft of building the building, something we value tremendously, as all architects do. But we all understand that we are actually building this thing physically. And although we want this big plane of wall to be in there, materials tend to move with different weather sites, so we have to have some kind of opportunity for those materials to move and not crack. Or at least if they crack, control where the cracking goes. Well, that's a whole different set of skill set than the one that's come up with the big vision for the whole thing. Because people are often, they've learned from past experience about things that are easier or things that will solve the problem. And part of our job is to often say, okay, but can we do more? And can we do better? And can we change it? Or is a new product come along that's going to allow us to do something differently than we did in the past? And we need to make sure that we're staying current with those aspects of our trade as well. So pushing some people that may want to just do it the same way they've always done it, but pushing them to think further is part of our role as well as sort of design leaders.
One of my passions, as any listener to this podcast certainly must be aware of, is visions. Every successful project has a vision. It certainly plays a critical role in architecture. We talked about how that works.
So that visioning step is something that every project we have, we start with that before we've done anything. No pencil to paper at all. This is just like, what are your goals, the owner's goals, and then we come up with a vision statement from that about what these are things. And they become the touchstone that we can go back to, because they're not, got to have two rooms next to each other. It's saying something like, it's got to be whatever. They tend to be fairly broad, but they're really clear about where we want to be going, and everyone can understand them. And we can balance and compare a lot of choices against what are those statements in a really effective way. So we do that. I do think that vision is critical.
A good leader doesn't have a completely definitive prescription. The good leader has clarity of vision and a willingness to figure out with the team how to get to that vision. They are willing also to make a bunch of trade-offs. You have a better idea than you do, and they're willing to make the call. right? This one fits the vision more than that one, and we're going to go on. Everybody agree? Fine, let's go,
But that decision, like, okay, this is the better one, we're going to go that way. If it's authentic, if that's done authentically, like everyone on the team can see that that is the best idea, right? And this is the way to go. And then the decision is made that we're going that way. They've got to perceive it as having been done authentically by that leader, or they won't support the decision.
Right.
In my mind.
Yep.
And if they believe that it may not be the right, but if they think that the decision has been based on really good input from the team, they'll go with it. They'll adopt it as their own and run with it. If they think it's been an arbitrary decision, forget it.
We then turned our attention to compensation. The challenges of rewarding this complex team are many, especially when you want to reward teamwork over individual accomplishment. And those challenges are compounded by the one-off nature of the business.
A software company doesn't make a physical product necessarily, other than the CDs perhaps, but you make a product that is scalable, so to speak. I mean, once you make it, you can sell it, 1 billion times. We can't. We build them one at a time. And so the ability to reward financially is constrained simply by the fact that we are essentially selling our hours. And so we don't, build 6 more of these just like it and then reap, 100% profit on them because we don't have to do anything anymore. We'd have to move on to the next project and start all over again. The way typically that in architecture that people are rewarded is that, and maybe I can't speak for the entire industry, but in my experience, in architecture, that opportunity is the reward for a good service. Now, we have a profit share methodology within the firm. We obviously have hourly compensation. There's salary that we can adjust, but we don't. The sky isn't the limit on that, right? And the profit share, we had actually internally at our firm, we talk a lot about how do we want to do this. Is that we have this. We don't call it bonus. We call it profit share. And so we, as a firm of 6 offices across the country, we share all the profit evenly across the firm. And so if you're an employee in one office and that office has an okay year and another office has a killer year, you will benefit from the other office having had a great year because we push it around. It's a percentage. We state a percentage of your base compensation as our target for profit share every year. It's a target. So if we have a great year, we can overshare, as we have in the last several years, frankly. Or if we don't have a great year, we can dial it back. And so oftentimes the big announcement of the year is, what percentage of the profit share are we distributing? Is it 100% of the profit share? Is it 120? Is it 80? There's that big moment when that's sort of revealed. And the reason we do it, and the reason we call it profit share and not bonus, is that perhaps back to the very first question we were talking about related to the individual or the team, we want to have a culture where the offices aren't competing against each other. And frankly, internally, the teams and the individuals are not competing against each other, but acting as a team. And so we think that we have a system that rewards the whole rather than the individual along the way. Now, individuals are promoted and individuals get raises, but the compensation at any given level within the firm fits within a very narrow band. So it's typically not a financial compensation for excellence. It's opportunity, and that opportunity means continued advancement often.
So I wondered how this team focus realized itself in performance reviews. They do them, of course, but what is the balance between individual performance and the employee's ability to work as part of a team?
At the early stages of someone's career, it's 100% team, the ability to work with team members. The difference isn't really like bad design versus outstanding design. It's outstanding design versus kind of average design. By the time you're sitting at a desk in the office, we think you pass some level of muster from a design standpoint. We've seen your portfolio. You've been hopefully to a reputable program somewhere. I will say that I don't, whether you're Harvard or Idaho State, it doesn't matter. You can see the quality. You can see the quality pretty much in someone's portfolio. They're exceedingly good tools. Now we can be surprised both ways, but as a low bar, you can pretty much see that someone's hitting a low bar or hitting a bar through their portfolio. And then just listening to the way they talk about design and their passion for design, it can come out pretty clearly in the interview process. Now, we're not, we do not have a lock on, 100% hiring awesome people. We fail as much as we succeed, probably fail more often than we succeed. But usually the failure is on some behavioral issue that the person has that's not in their skill to design per se. Because we don't need everyone in the office to be the star designer. We need people to be really good problem solvers and collaborators and partners. And we need them to be complete their work in a timely fashion and do so in a way that's communicative to the team. We need them to be responsible for things that the clients are asking. I mean, there's a whole slew of things other than design that are really important traits that we are probably gauging more than anything else.
This brought up one of my favorite questions, one I've spent a couple of episodes on. Do you have a fairly low tolerance for superstar assholes?
Wow, Chris, that's a great question. I would say that we, having hired and fired people, we have great expectations and who have great pedigrees and have great skill sets. They're not always fully formed, and so we want fully formed. And so being outstanding at one particular aspect of what we do probably won't be enough. And the ability, if you're awesome but just cannot get along with other people, we will exercise that from the team. And that can be whether you're the star designer person, the one up there talking to the client about the vision, or whether you're the person coordinating the mechanical stuff into the building, and which is maybe more of an internal role than an external. We definitely have internal and external roles in the firm, and business people talk about those kinds of roles, and we definitely have those. I told you when I began to value teams was when I was running in high school. I think one of the first opportunities I had as a leader to really effectively make a change was on a project. I was brought onto a team where I was replacing an existing project manager who was having a hard time working with the client's project manager. And this person did not have, the employee did not have very good words for the project manager on the other side. And I wonderfully wanted the opportunity to lead the project. So I said, I'll do it. But I was incredibly fearful of this person because I had heard such horrific things about them. I wasn't sure how I was going to do all this, but long and short of it is that side of the equation, that project manager, once I figured out what their hot buttons were and how I could make them happy, which was relatively easy from my perspective, that relationship flourished. And to this day, that project manager, who I was incredibly fearful of when I first took on the job, literally on one of his trips to Seattle for one of the project meetings, he brought his then fiance or then girlfriend. We went to dinner, and I took him to this dinner place down in the Pike Place Market. They had a meal that they thought was the best they had ever had, and apparently I went home to home, and they went out on a little walk on the waterfront, and he proposed to her that night. And to this day, we chit chat. So anyway, so this person that I was afraid of ended up being a dear friend, a long-term dear friend at the end of the day. So that side of the equation was solved readily, but I realized that there was something else going on in the team. So it wasn't just that our previous project manager couldn't get along with the owner's project manager. Internally on the team, there was something that was wrong. I knew most of the people quite well on the team, and this was this had a team of maybe 7 or 8 people. Which for an architecture firm, that's a sort of medium, modest team. Some of the projects I'm working on now, that's a couple million square feet in the DC area. We have teams of 20 architects. So, half of that or a little less. It's a good sized team, but it's not huge. And it was a mix. The team mix there was one very senior technical architect. So the in-house side of the equation, very senior, very well respected in the office. Someone I didn't know exceedingly well, but by reputation, I thought this guy, he'll help us out. We're going to be in good shape. The rest of the team were actually fairly young people that were exceedingly committed to architecture and wanted to do the right thing and do a great thing. they were not getting along with that senior technical architect at all, the rest of the team. And this person would go off and have meetings and not tell the rest of the team he was meeting with the consultants. All these sorts of behaviors that were not about how he brings these other people in and leads them and guides them and enables them to succeed. We had all this behavior about kind of rat holing his information over here, and then why weren't they knowing what was going on, and he blamed them. So I realized that this highly regarded individual, highly skilled, older than I was, more experienced than I was, person was the root of why this team wasn't really working very well. And I needed to replace him. And at the time, I went to the partner in the firm at the time, and he said, I don't know, Tim, you can't do that. This is this person, and they can do that, and they're going to execute this. And I said, yeah, but no one else in the team is productive. No one wants to do anything because they're not included. And I said, we've got to do this. And they thought about it for a week or two, and then finally they came around, and I kept insisting, and they said, okay, we'll do it. So we switched that person out. We didn't actually replace that person on the team. So we removed this senior technical person, did not replace him, but we leaned on emerging younger talent within the team. And these weren't, fresh out of school people. These people had enough experience that they were probably ready to take the next step. But we encouraged them to step up, and they did. And the project ended up winning an AIA award in the city for where the building was sitting. The owner was happy. The performance of the building it happened to be a music venue, so the performance, the quality of the environment inside the building was incredibly important, and we hit all the metrics and exceeded them. Anyway, a wonderfully successful project at the end of the day. But without removing that one person, who arguably was the most senior technical person on the team, I'm not sure we would have gotten the same result. We unleashed a couple of the team members, kind of unleashed and really blossomed on the project. And then what went on, and you asked before, how do we reward people for success? Well, they've gone on to lead other projects and have great roles in other projects as a result of the success that they had on that particular project. But it took, removing that one individual that was not behaving in a team fashion. And I, doing this thing, I was like, am I doing the right thing? If I just screwed the project up, and is it going to fail now? And, I didn't know. And I read all kinds of books about changing people out and changing talent out. And is it the right thing to do? And of course, there's an immediate kind of hit, right? So you struggle for a little bit, but then you come out of it. And again, I think we went considerably higher than we would have had we stayed with the same norm. So it's that willingness to take the leap, that you've got to make a change and go forward, but not do it too rashly. Like, it's not just like that was one bad meeting, they're gone. It's got to be more like, okay, there's a pattern here. We've had a conversation with the person. They're not changing. We need to address this and act. And so what I've just relayed to you from that earliest experience, which was, umpteen years ago now, to one more recently where we changed up someone. This happened to be the sort of design lead, face of the client lead on an incredibly prominent project in the DC area that we were pursuing, but no one else in the office is willing to work with that person. And we had tried and tried and tried and tried. They were very talented, but no one else. Literally, there were two individuals that, from my perception, they were younger, talented folks that were enamored with this person enough that they wanted to continue to work with him. And I thought, well, if those two people are continuing, things will proceed, we'll be okay. So one by one, those two people came to me and said, I can't work with this guy anymore. And I thought, okay, any of the people that had any reason to want to be working with this person have now just told me they can't. So that was, at that moment, I realized that I didn't have a choice any longer. No one else in the office wanted to work, and it was too destructive. And this was after maybe 18 months of struggling with this decision and spending way too much of my life dealing with this issue about do we, don't we. The final straw for me, so as the managing partner in the office, I don't demand respect. Hopefully I'm earning it every day, and I'm enabling people. And I think my leadership style is one of enabling, and I like that idea. But I'm also engaged in the projects. And so some people said I'm more engaged in the projects than they would expect from someone in my role. I don't go in and try to inflict my will on the project as much as I want to understand what's going on. So frankly, when clients ask me, or when I'm talking about what we're doing in the office, I have some semblance of knowledge. And with 90-ish folks and I don't know, dozens of projects, it's something that I still love the idea that I can talk about each of the projects that we're doing at some level. So I do touch base with the projects. There was a meeting and I was kind of grazing in the meeting and I made a comment and he looked at me and he said, "Why do I have to listen to you, Tim?" And I thought, I hadn't even said like, do this. I just had been asking like, can you focus back on this particular aspect I didn't quite understand? And then he turned to me and said, why do I have to listen to you? And I thought, okay, so if he shows me zero respect, zero, he must. And then the complaints I hear from all the employees about not showing respect, which I had not sort of seen. I don't typically see it, right? It happens in a conference room or over here, or I'm not there. But when I realized that he was willing to look me in the face and just say, essentially, why do I have to listen to you? Who are you? I realized that he would say it to anyone, and probably something a lot harsher along the line, which was consistent with the things I've been hearing. But that was the moment where I realized, like, okay, we're done. This is after maybe 3 or 4 months before we did this. We let him go. Toby, the other partner in the office, we'd said, okay, let's take him to dinner, because we had had a huge success and he was part of that. And I said, let's go to dinner. We'll celebrate the success and we'll help him understand the things that he needs to work on. So we expensive dinner, whatever you want. We had the goal was to have a nice evening, congratulate, celebrate as a team, but then also talk about the things that need to be worked on. And we got through the congratulatory part and we were talking about the things that really need to happen to change. And he immediately was talking about partnership and advancement in the firm and all this. And we're like, but these are the things that you need to, like we laid it out, like these things need to improve or change because they're not going to help you. He'd been on a PIP, a year before, and we had done everything to try and help him understand these behaviors. But anyway, obviously we got to the place where the very hard decision was that we needed to separate ways. But, the client immediately called up and was like, "What have you done?" And I'm like, "Don't worry, it's for the better." And, now we're probably a year into that, after that. And I would argue we have met and exceeded their expectations. So it was the right thing to do. But that's a really tough moment when you see that talent doing so much destruction around them. And I relate, one of your earlier podcasts, you talk about this exact kind of behavior. And it certainly is replicated in the architecture environment.
So how does Tim build his teams? With such a complex product and such large stakes, how do you ensure you have the right people on the team?
We have a marketing director that we hired. When I first came to DC, we went through a cycle. I had to rebuild the marketing department 3 different times, a whole bunch of reasons. I won't go into all of them. But when finally the final director, we got rid of the final director, the 3rd round, I realized that the person that was sitting in the 2nd seat, I'm just like, she's going to do it now. She's now the director. And she looked at me like, "I can't do this." And I'm like, "Yeah, you can." And then she did it. And she's helped us for the next 3 years, have incredible results. Our RFP response hit rate is over 80%, which is phenomenal. Like anytime we respond to an RFP, 80% of the time they're asking us back to go to the interview or to get on the short list or go to the next stage. Phenomenal hit rate. And it's all because of the work that she's been corralling. But if you look on the face of it, she shouldn't have been in that role, but we decided we were going to go there. And so she's the one that says that we have created an environment in the office that's enabling other people to kind of go to the next level and take on that next level of their career development and advancement. And that's something I'm really proud of, because I think good people, talented people, when you present them with a great opportunity, they need a base sort of skill set, right? They can't just be fresh out of school. But once they've got a base in there, rather than holding them down longer, releasing them sooner has been a really great thing. I've been stunned in a really good way at seeing how once you kind of release some people, how they just continue to rise and do great things. That's been a great revelation for me in terms of talent. And that's why when I can't financially pour money at people, but I can pour opportunity. And that is often what is a huge motivator for people is that opportunity and more responsibility. And so where I'm going back to the marketing director, she is someone that has been utilizing that 90-day period that's hired, and then within 90 days you're conditional. She has used that more liberally than anyone else. And I love it. I love the fact that she gets to the 90-day period and she's like, it's just not working. We're going to move on. And she's done it a number of times, and she has built a remarkably strong team because she set just exceedingly high standards. And if you're not there, move on. I think it's built respect because the other people that are there realize that when people aren't hitting at the same level that they are, they're not going to be around longer. They're not going to carry that dead weight for very long. And I think it's built her a lot of loyalty from the folks that she expects a lot, but she rewards a lot, and she doesn't. That standard doesn't vary from person to person. She expects of everyone. And it's a great trait.
When I asked Tim how he builds leadership within his team, it was not a shock for an architect to ascribe at least some of it to the physical layout of their office.
I talk about building leaders, like everyone. I want everyone in the office to be a leader, and that's probably too much, but that is the goal. I want you all to be leaders. And so, how do we create a culture where you're going to become a leader? And I don't think that's by having other leaders tell other people what to do all the time. It's about listening to everyone. It's about trying to let the best idea for the project come forward. So the focus is on the project, not on an individual or not on a firm. It's on the project and the owner's needs in that project. That's the focus. So if you're contributing to the success of that thing, we're all ears. One way that we've kind of made it manifest is that the ZGF partners around the firm typically have offices, whereas most of the rest of the staff are out in sort of open office situations. Now, the offices for the partners have various degrees of openness. The ones in Seattle, there's definitely walls and they have a sliding door that they can close it off, but 99% of the time those doors are open. It's a very open environment. We took it one step further in DC, and we just don't have any offices, period. So I sit at a desk, the exact same desk that everyone else does. So whether you're an intern or whether you're me, the managing partner, we all sit at the exact same desks. So same length and same this. Now, my position in the office might be such that it does afford me a small table behind my desk where I can have a group meeting, but I'm out there with everyone. I move around the office as project teams get sorted around just like everyone else. And I love that egalitarian kind of approach to it so that no one is seen as being sort of the ultimate authority. This is really, we want to make great decisions together. And I don't know if that manifests itself in terms of creating leaders, but we want to have the perception that we're all able to contribute. We had a new employee join the team, a really prominent project team. I think she had like 3 years of experience, so super early on in her career. And yet she's emerged to be the third most important person on that project team just by the way she works as a team, the commitment she has, the skill set she brings, and her focus on getting it done. All those things have meant that she's just risen to be the number 3 person on that project with arguably tremendously less experience than other team members. And some team members have come to me and be like, but I have way more experience. I'm like, yeah, but she just did this, and this. Did you? And so they kind of get it that we're looking at your performance and what you're contributing and your willingness to contribute. All those things will continue to make you successful.
One of the hardest parts of being the leader is being open to new ideas, to be willing to recognize a better idea when it comes along.
I find that I sometimes think I know a direction for this is what's going to go down. And I'm not always wrong. I'm not always right. But I love when the smarter people in the room or others in the room are able to help move it to somewhere else and come up with a solution that isn't what I thought was what it should be, but ends up being a good, if not better, answer. I've often learned that there's many ways to skin the cat. And so I have a way to do it, but there are plenty of other ways that are as good, if not better. And being willing to let it go in a direction that you didn't think it was going to be, as a leader is a really important thing because it's what allows the team to then own it rather than it being your thing that you're driving. And that's super hard.
Like many good leaders, Tim takes special delight in helping to build the leaders underneath him.
The career in architecture, I think it's not uncommon that we spend a lot of our career trying to get responsibility or to receive responsibility. I mentioned that the one tool that we have to reward people is to give them more opportunity. Opportunity in many ways, I guess you could equate to responsibility on projects. So I spent my time both at LMN and early on at ZGF trying to continue to grow in terms of gaining responsibility and leadership. It's been a really exciting time in the last 70 years or so, where it's been awesome to transition to a point where I'm really focused on giving away responsibility and helping others grow and take on that responsibility. It's been an awesome kind of trajectory, and arguably the most rewarding aspect of what I've been doing is in watching others, enabling others to grow, helping others that show incredible promise have that opportunity to grow and become great leaders themselves. The first time I saw this was a project that I was working on for the University of Washington. And I was at a point in my career where I was asked to be the project manager on a number of projects simultaneously. And so I was definitely stressed, where if I'd had 2 or 3 projects, typically I was responsible for in the past, I now had 13 or 14 projects that I was supposed to be managing, which is an obscenely and absurdly high number. And so I realized I would complain to the managing partner that there's no way I can do this and I can't do it. And he would look at me and just say, well, you're going to find a way, which, was incredibly frustrating at one level, but it also meant I had to go find a way. And so I realized that identifying people on the project teams that were strong, that had the ability to take on additional responsibility, people that would learn to communicate essential things up the chain and not everything up the chain. And that when they did communicate, they often would present themselves with solutions. So they'd say, here's the problem, here's a potential solution. What do you think? Versus dumping the problem in your lap. So when I found those people on projects, I would rapidly put them in a position where they were more or less responsible for the project, and that our relationship then allowed, they would come to me when they knew they needed to. The first time this really began, and the first person that I realized this was happening with, and I say happening because I don't know that I sort of consciously went out to do this. It just evolved. But she was someone that was a great technical architect, just a great person, great team kind of collaborator, and that the client had begun to really find the way she engaged to be very appealing to them. It became very easy then to step back and have her do more and more and more, such that she ended up being essentially leading the project and even leading it through construction, such that they sat in the construction trailer and had 100% responsibility on a daily basis. Did an outstanding job. It was a really long project, such that I think she got married, had her first child, and then by the time the project was proceeding on, the child was now 2 or 3 years old. And the story she relayed to me at one point that I love, which is that she was walking her now 3-year-old child through the building. Again, this child's life, her mother had been involved in this project the entire time she had been alive. But she was walking around the project, and the project was largely complete. And the contractor and building occupants and faculty members using the building were all coming up to her saying how much they love the building. When she and her daughter were walking out of the building, her 3-year-old daughter, turned to her and said, "Mommy, I'm so proud of you." And I realized that even a 3-year-old could see what her mother had achieved in that building, and the success she had achieved. And that single kind of story is one of the most rewarding aspects of my career, or certainly was to date, and one I relay a lot, because it dawned on me that finding people, trusting them, allowing them to continue to grow can be great for the firm, for the project, for everything for them, and it's so evident that even a 3-year-old can see that it's really a wonderful thing.
In summary, Tim has found his life's passion in building not only great and useful structures, but in building and leading teams.
I think that I found something that I love doing and I was passionate about. And for me, that's kind of the secret sauce, that if it's something that you love doing, and you're passionate about it, and I know it's a cliche to say you don't really you go to work at all every day, but I really don't feel. But there's certainly days when I feel like I've been at work, but I've never really envisioned what I do as, I'm going to punch a clock and I get remunerated and I go home and do something else. It's usually architecture and leading teams and thinking about making cities better. It is all consuming for me in terms of the way I love interacting with the world.
Thanks to Tim for sharing his experience and giving us a chance to understand the joys and challenges of leadership in the world of commercial architecture. The next conversation episode will be with Rick Rashid, the founding father of Microsoft Research. We'll discuss his life in academia and in the world of corporate research, the challenges of building and leading a global research organization, and his passion for helping to uncover the next big thing. That conversation will be in 2 weeks. Next episode, we return to the studio and return to the subject of diversity. We'll tackle the difficulty of including a broad range of perspectives in your decision-making, and how leadership is key to making it work. Leading Smart is from me, Chris Williams. You can find out more about the show and discover other resources for leaders at my website, clwill.com. If you like the show, please share it with your friends, especially on social media. Referrals are the greatest source of new listeners. I'd also love your feedback. I'm the CL Will on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Or send an email to pod@clwill.com. That's it for this episode. The next episode returns to the studio to continue our discussion of diversity. We'll discuss how a broad spectrum addresses a host of cultural issues. I hope you'll listen. Until then, please remember that each of the several dozen decisions you make today are part of Leading Smart.